Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today, I'm going to be talking about the episode The Secret. The Secret was an episode from season 4, and it was directed by Harvey Laidman. Harvey was an assistant director, a first assistant director for a few years on the Waltons, and then he had an opportunity to direct an episode. I think he directed a few episodes of the Waltons. That was not an uncommon circumstance on the Waltons, where a number of our assistant directors ultimately had a chance to direct. That'll sometimes happen with TV shows where after a while people who've worked for some time on the show also direct, whether it's assistant directors or directors of photography or camera operators or cast, as in the case of both Ralph Waite and Richard Thomas directing episodes of The Waltons. The Secret revolves around Jim Bob and his questioning of where he came from. Elizabeth is teasing him that he doesn't look like a Walton, like there's such a thing as looking like a Walton. Of course, with John Walmsley, Jason, Aaron, Ben, and Elizabeth, they all had red hair, but the rest of us didn't. So you could say that neither Richard, nor I, or David Harper looked the same because we didn't have red hair. And there's even a point in the episode where Jim Bob's talking to John Boy and he says, well, I don't look like a Walton. And John Boy says, well, what does Walt look like? Well, I always thought you looked like me. Do I look like a Walton? But I can understand. I think it's not uncommon for children at some point to question their heritage. Do they look like, I'm the only one of the children, and actually in my immediate family, the only one with brown eyes. My dad has blue eyes, my mom had green eyes, my sister and brother have blue eyes, I have brown eyes. So I was like, where'd my brown eyes come from? As it turns out, my grandmother on my mother's side had brown eyes, but that is the only person anywhere in my sort of immediate grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, where I saw that brown eyes. So I think it is not uncommon for children sometimes to hit a point where they question that. Sometimes because they're seriously concerned, sometimes because maybe they don't feel they fit in. And I think Jim Bob's just going through that. And he's allowing Elizabeth's teasing to get to him to a point where he really does start to question it himself. Along the way, there's some other aspects of the episode that are kind of fun. At one point, Grandpa makes reference to when John Boy's running out and saying he has all these deadlines. Grandpa tells him the origin of the term deadline, where he, with this large tree branch, draws a line in the sand and says it used to be that literally you crossed the line, you were dead. So much more serious implications than the way that we throw around the term deadline these days. So I'm very glad that deadline doesn't mean the same thing that it used to, because I feel like I'm up against deadlines and missing deadlines all the time. In this scene, Jim Bob is up in the treehouse as he's playing with his yo-yo and reflecting on his concerns about not looking like a Walton. I always thought the treehouse was a fun set. It actually was erected in that tree, and there were multiple episodes where we were up in the treehouse or things happened in the treehouse. At one point, someone lifts Reckless up into the treehouse by sort of a sling to get the dog up there to play with. Of course, in the Ferris wheel, Elizabeth climbs the treehouse and is re-experiencing that fear of being on the Ferris wheel. So it was a fun set. Not only did we use it when we were filming in it, but also sometimes we would just go up there for fun in our off time. There's a bit of work getting a camera up in there when they had to do that, because you kind of had to climb the treehouse. But they would shoot actually in the treehouse at times, and sometimes they would recreate the treehouse on the ground if they needed to do more extensive filming. In this case, you're just seeing Jim Bob sitting there on the edge, so he was actually in the treehouse. Several times in the episode, Jason is running late. John Boy's trying to get him to hurry up because John Boy's running late and trying to get to school, and he's going to drop Jason someplace, and Jason's running and late. And what's interesting is that of the members of the actual cast, John Walmsley, who played Jason, is often one when we're all doing something, we're all at an event and everybody's like, oh, we're supposed to be down in the lobby at this time. John is often the one that we're waiting for. He's a straggler sometimes in a very endearing way, but he just doesn't have that sense of urgency to hurry up and be there, whereas Mary's pretty much always early. Eric's pretty much always early. I'm sort of borderline. Sometimes I'm early, sometimes I'm on time. I'm rarely late. So funny, the interesting real life dynamics of everybody. So I had to smile when I saw John Boy urging Jason to hurry up because they're running late. Cute piece relative to the yo-yo, where they clearly hired someone who not only is an actor, but really knows how to handle a yo-yo. You can tell by the fact that you can see him and the yo-yo in the same shot, and these were not special effects. So clearly an actor who knew his way around a yo-yo for real. I enjoyed the subplot that John Walmsley, Jason, had. His scholarship was part of, I believe, Professor Breckenridge's legacy. Mrs. Breckenridge wants these various different articles written, and Jason keeps sort of volunteering John Boy, and then Mrs. Breckenridge starts asking if John Boy can write more articles because she's very impressed with John Boy's writing because he's a good writer. Jason keeps sort of promising that John Boy will do it, and then John Boy feels obligated to honor that. So John Boy struggles with that, and Mama finally at one point says, well, did you ever think of saying no? And Jason ultimately has to confront Mrs. Breckenridge. And at John Boy's suggestion, he encourages Mrs. Breckenridge to write it herself about the professor because, as John Boy said, she knows him better than anybody else. And so Jason uses that, and there's truth in it. So he is able to convince Mrs. Breckenridge that perhaps she is indeed the best person to write about the professor. But John Boy raises the question to Jason about Jason somehow not feeling that he deserved that scholarship. And John Boy tells him, he said, you got that scholarship on your own merits because you deserved it because you're a really talented musician. And I think that's finally when Jason begins to recognize that for himself and feel that he was deserving of that scholarship and not feel that he has to continue to curry favor in order to actually be worthy of that scholarship or fear that it might be taken away from him. So I think that's a lovely sort of secondary message there to each of us to believe in ourselves and our own talents and not feel that we so easily question our own value and worth. Actress Nora Marlow appeared in this episode as Mrs. Brimmer. She was in a number of our episodes and always did just beautiful work and was always a joy to have around the set. In this case, Jim Bob approaches her because he understands that when he was born, all of the other children were taken to Mrs. Brimmer's while his mom was taken to the hospital in Charlottesville. He doesn't understand why Mama had to go to Charlottesville to deliver Jim Bob. So he goes to Mrs. Brimmer to ask her about that. Mrs. Brimmer then speaks to Grandma, asking about the circumstance. And all of these things ultimately lead to Jim Bob and John Boy going to the courthouse to look for his birth record, to prove that he's a Walton. And in going to the courthouse, as they look at the court ledger, the birth records, he discovers that he had a twin who died at birth. And this is the first that Jim Bob or John Boy knew about it. And then Jim Bob goes back and John Boy basically confronts our father about this issue. And Jim Bob, finally finds out this secret and it's brought to light. So it culminates in really a very beautiful moment between Olivia and Jim Bob. And I thought this hug that they shared with all of the emotion of Jim Bob's feelings about having been a twin and losing a twin at birth and was it somehow his fault? And Olivia's feeling and emotions about having lost a child and then not being able to face that and not telling Jim Bob. So there's so much emotion tied up in this final moment that I think is just beautifully played between David Harper and Michael Learned. Thanks so much for joining me for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons about the episode The Secret. If you enjoyed this, please do like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and I really do appreciate you joining me. I'll be back for more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Thanks for watching.